Hello, this is Aliona Bangayan. I will be interviewing Micaela Holloway. All right, Micaela Holloway is 22 years old and grew up in Southern California. From 2013 to 2015, she went on a long-term missions trip to Baja California, Mexico, to serve at Rancho Sordo Mudo, which means deaf-mute ranch. She worked at the school and aided deaf and mute children between the ages of 5 and 18. While at the ranch, her responsibilities ranged from childcare, planning classes, cleaning, cooking, organizing groups of visitors, and teaching her Level 1 class. She has no professional credentials for teaching, but several more experienced staff members were willing to help her with planning and any language barriers. For the 2013 to 2014 school year, Micaela's family lived at the ranch as well. During this year, they all served as a family in different areas of the ranch. Then the following summer, her family moved to Ensenada, about 20 minutes away, while Micaela stayed at the ranch. Her family began working with the deaf and mute in Ensenada. Micaela views her family as a support and foundation for many of the missionaries to the deaf in the area. All right, and here is Micaela. Hey.
Hello.
Okay, so um, first questions will be about how you converted to Christianity. So first and foremost, how did you become a Christian?
I grew up in a Christian household, but I did not become a Christian until I was 16 years old. I was struggling with a lot of anxiety and depression, and I knew the truth but didn't accept it as the truth until I went to my sister's church in July when I was 16, and I prayed with my mom and my older sister and became a Christian.
So who influenced your walk in Christ? Was it mostly your sister and your mom?
Mostly my mom, and later on, my good friend Amber really influenced my walk in Christ, how she loved everybody and spoke the truth, even when it hurt, and was just a very good example towards me.
Nice. Okay, so what did you desire most about a relationship with Jesus?
I think what brought me to Christ when I was 16 was I just felt really empty. I felt like something was missing in my life. And I knew the truth, and I knew that it should be Christ. I didn't want to give my life to Christ at that time. But when I finally did, I felt full again. I felt joyful and happy, which is something that I hadn't felt in a very long time. So I think what I most desired from God was love and joy and peace.
Sweet, yeah. So we're gonna move on to a little bit before you started serving in Mexico. What motivated you to serve in Mexico?
I honestly didn't want to be in Mexico at first. I was doing a gap year program right out of high school, and I was planning on moving to Northern California with one of my good friends and going to school up there. And then I went down to Mexico to visit my family, and I just felt so at peace there. I felt like, I don't know, like I'd come home almost. And as soon as I walked onto the ranch, I just felt this overwhelming sense of just peace and where I was supposed to be. And I thought, no, I don't want to be here. That's not my plan. But obviously God had different plans. And I talked to one of the teachers there, who is now one of my good friends. And he said, like, what do you want to do with your life? Do you want to go to school and not feel fulfilled over there, or do you want to come to Mexico and do God's work down here when you know that you can do something down here? And I thought, oh, okay. So I went to Mexico.
So were there any other options that you were considering besides the ranch?
Well, I was planning on going up north in Northern California and going to school. I wanted to go to nursing school, but now going to Mexico for those 2 years just completely changed everything, changed my entire perspective.
What preparations had to be made in serving at a deaf mute ranch in another country?
I had to raise support, which was very difficult. It's very difficult trying to ask people for money because we had to pay room and board while we were there. And then I also had to prepare myself to teach when I hadn't really had a lot of experience in that. So I had to learn how to manage my time and how to plan a classroom. How do I teach kids a language, basically, which is very daunting. But I had a lot of help from my mother, who is a very, very good teacher, and then also the principal and his wife at the ranch. They helped a lot with how to plan a classroom, becoming like immersed into the culture there, and just getting used to living in a different country.
So were you already fluent in Spanish when you went to Mexico?
No, I was not. Since almost all of the kids there are deaf, there was one mute kid while I was there. The primary language that is spoken is Mexican Sign Language. So I learned Mexican Sign Language, and I kind of learned Spanish as I went along. I mostly taught lower levels of the school. So I had children who didn't have a language whatsoever, no Spanish, no Mexican Sign Language. They didn't know how to express themselves, so it was my responsibility to teach them different types of vocabulary. So I learned the Spanish along with the vocabulary I was teaching them. But I mainly taught them sign language, since that is their first language.
Okay. So what type of training did you have to undergo? Like, I understand you had to learn Mexican Sign Language, but what about with the teaching and anything else that you had to do at the ranch?
We had, when I first arrived at the ranch, we had weekly sign language classes where we were taught like a lot of the vocabulary and the structure of sign language, because the structure is different than English and even Spanish. And we also had weekly teacher meetings where we would sit down, we would talk about how our classes are going, how the students are progressing or not progressing, if there's any behavioral problems, and how to overcome each situation. And then, of course, Johnny, our principal, his door was always open to us for any questions that we might have had. But it was very, you learn a lot on the job. A lot of the group members that came down looked at me and they're like, "Oh, you're so young. Like, what are you doing here? You don't have a teaching credential or anything." And I always told them, like, the harvest is plenty, but the workers are few. You know, not a lot of people are willing to come down to Mexico to teach deaf children. So yeah, we kind of learned on the job.
All right. So how did your family help you prepare for this, this whole working at the ranch and everything? I know you said they helped influence you to stay there, but how else did they prepare you?
Like everything. I probably wouldn't have stayed another year if my family wasn't there to just love and support me. My mom is very, very passionate about the deaf in Mexico, so she was always an encouragement to me to when either students were acting out or if there were just problems in life. She was always an encouragement to me. My brother is a very good friend of mine, so it was very nice to have a friend there alongside of me. And yeah, they were a lot emotional encouragement to me.
It's pretty sweet that you had that support group there.
Yeah.
So how long did it take to overcome culture shock and language barriers, or was there even any culture shock since you lived in Southern California?
um, it was mostly culture shock if I went back to the States, just because there's a lot of stuff in America that that we don't really have in Mexico, and vice versa. So I remember going back to the States, and I was just like, oh wow, there's so much stuff here and so many little problems here that people think about that I don't really think of as a big deal. And then language barriers, it probably took me about 6 months, 5 months, maybe to like really get the language down. Just because um, you're immersed into it all the time. You know, I worked 6 days a week, and then even on my day off, I would use sign language. And you're just surrounded by it all the time, so it's very difficult not to pick it up very quickly.
So you said that you took language classes as soon as you arrived at the ranch. How quickly after you first arrived at the ranch did you start teaching?
I was a teacher's assistant for the first year I was at the ranch. And then that was during my senior year in high school. And then I did a gap year program the year after high school. And then ages 20 to 21, I was a teacher. So the first year I wasn't actually in charge of an entire classroom. Thank goodness. That would have been crazy. And I had the opportunity to just work one-on-one with students and be learning the language basically alongside the students because they were all new at the ranch as well.
So they came to the ranch not knowing sign language at all?
Yes.
Or any? Okay. Cool. So we'll move on to your time at the ranch more so. So how many deaf and mute children would you say were at the ranch, and how many were actually in your class?
Let's see. I had 6 students in my class. There were about either anywhere from 15 to 20 students at the ranch altogether. There were 4 different levels, and I taught level 1. So I had the newer students or younger students, and then students who either were not mature enough to advance to the next level. So very wide range of students.
So how did they get there? How did like word get around that there was a deaf mute ranch? Like why did people really want to bring their kids to this ranch?
In Mexico, there's not a lot of opportunities for the deaf to go to school. They basically send them to basically like a special education school where they're not really taught a lot of any language at all. So we would get a lot of students who knew math but didn't know the colors or anything like that because they would go to a school and they would teach them math, but they wouldn't teach them like the language at all. And it just, word basically kind of got around in the area. So yeah, there wasn't, it's not a credentialed school through Mexico, so that's kind of like a drawback for a lot of parents, but we're one of the, I think out of 2 schools in Baja California north that teach sign language to the students. I think 2 or 3. So, and we're the only Christian school in Baja California North that teaches sign language to the kids. So,
Interesting. All right. So besides, of course, having to teach them sign language, and all of that, what were some key differences in aiding deaf and mute children as opposed to like teaching regular kids about uh, general education and
Yeah,
stuff like that?
yeah. Since a lot of the kids came without any language whatsoever, they didn't have any discipline either at home, because their parents had no way of communicating with them. So how would they tell a child not to do something? So a lot of the kids had a lot of behavioral problems. So you had to work through that with them as well. Um, they would go up to another kid and like hit them. Be like, you have to tell them like, no, like
Mm-hmm.
that's not really okay. That's not very nice. You shouldn't do that. And they'd be like, oh, really? Like, that's not nice. Like, no, it's not. So just kind of different stuff like that that you wouldn't really think to have to teach in a school, because a lot of kids, either here in the States or wherever, their parents can communicate with them and say, like, have some sort of structure or discipline. So, yeah, that was a big one that we had to implement into our classrooms as well.
So since you were the level one teacher, was that you had to deal with most of the behavior issues, I'm assuming?
Yeah, there were a lot of behavioral issues in my classroom, especially. Um, that was very difficult for me, because I kind of have a soft heart, and I just want to love and be nice to everybody. But you can't really like, and like with sign language too, you can't say like, oh no, you can't do that. Like, you have to like actually put a stern face on, because sign language is um, you have to use facial expressions a lot. So you have to use a stern face, and I'm not very good at making a stern face. So how to learn stuff like that, and just kind of be almost like a parent to them as well, which is entirely new to me. I didn't know how to do that. So yeah, that was challenging, but it was good as well.
So can you describe a regular school day at the ranch or in your classroom?
Yeah,
Either one.
I breakfast is at 7 o'clock, and then we would have staff devotions till 7:30 to 8 o'clock, and then chapel for the little kids would be sorry, for all of the kids would be for from 8 o'clock to 8:30, and I taught chapel for level one my first year there, and then my second year I taught chapel once a week for level three, which was really fun. I really liked my last year teaching chapel because we went over the names of the Bible, like the sign names for the Bible, which I learned all of them in Mexican Sign Language. So that was really fun, and a lot of the kids didn't know all the sign names for the Bible, so we had fun and played games with that. And then from 8:30 until 11 o'clock, we would have class. And then from 11 to 11:15, break. 11:15 until 1:45 would be class time again, and that was it for the school day. Typical class day, in my level one class, we did exercises. So we would do jumping jacks, we would do little finger exercises to stretch out our fingers and like stretch out our wrists and our arms and all of that. And then we would do calendar time, which was basically going over the days of the week. And then I also had a mute kid in my class, so it was a lot of saying the words aloud as well, so he would recognize that. And then we would have Spanish time, math time. On Fridays, we would do, I called it Friday Fun Day. In the afternoons, we would do a craft. I usually try to do a biblical themed craft with them. And we learned about a different Bible story each week. And then after class time from like 2 o'clock until 2:30 was lunch. And then in the afternoons, we had a free afternoon, which was, for me, usually either when I was doing the sign classes or I had a teacher's meeting. I planned class probably 3 or 4 afternoons a week, either making copies or studying or looking up different teaching methods online or talking with Johnny about how to teach my classroom. And then in the evenings, we had dinner, and then after dinner, we took care of the kids outside while they just played outside, and the day was usually over 7:30, 8 o'clock. So yeah, pretty long day, but we were free after that time. So yeah.
So what were weekends like then?
Saturdays, all the teachers had off. Sundays was a very, very long day. We had breakfast and then church in the morning until mid-afternoon, and then usually that time I try to get a lot of planning done. I usually worked pretty much all afternoon, and then after lunch the teachers took care of the kids for 2 hours, either 2 or 3 hours, and then after that we send up the kids to the dorm, and then we go back to planning or we cook a meal. It depends on the day of the week, so, or the time of the month. We each signed up to cook a different meal on Sunday because that was the cook's day off. So
Okay. So how often did you have spare time, and how did you use that spare time?
I probably had 1 afternoon off a week, maybe 2, it depends. And then we had Saturdays off, and then the evenings off. We, as a staff, we would have game nights together, which was really fun, and it was a good opportunity to get to know the other staff members. And then on our free days, on Saturdays, movies are really, really cheap in Ensenada, like $50 a movie. So we would either go see movies or go get tacos or go to the beach, or yeah, just different like fun kind of relaxing stuff. So yeah.
So you lived in Southern California. How often did you drive up, or did you ever visit back home?
Not often. Maybe once every 2 months, 3 months. Because it was a 2.5 hour drive just to San Diego, and that's without the border wait. And sometimes the line at the border could be anywhere from like 5 minutes to like 2 hours long. So it just kind of depended on the time of the year and all of that. So we didn't make many trips back up to the States.
Okay. Did you ever feel like you were working off the clock, even though you were technically serving in full-time ministry? Like, do you feel like sometimes things were asked too much of you, but you felt like you had to do it anyway because you were working in ministry?
Yeah. I during my first year, I basically never said no, and it kind of ran me to the ground almost. I was very, very tired a lot, and it was just, I felt like a lot was asked of me, and I didn't know if I could do it. So my second year, I kind of learned that it was okay to say no. It was okay to take some time to just work on me and work on my relationship with God, instead of just saying yes to everybody and doing everything that I can, because yeah, that's just not, even though you are in ministry, you still have to take time to take care of yourself and make sure that you're okay so that you can pour out to other people, because if you're empty either spiritually or emotionally or physically, whatever, you can't really pour out to other people. So I just learned that I have to take time for myself.
So were there other things that you had to experience and learn the hard way besides don't work yourself into the ground?
Yeah, it was a lot of I don't know. I feel like there was a lot of stuff that I did that maybe the way I taught or how I reacted to a different situation that I could have done better. Even now, looking back at it, and I'm like, oh, I could have taught that better, or I could have said this instead of that. But I mean, that's like, I can't really beat myself up over that because at least I tried, and
Yeah.
I try to do my best, and I know that God had his hand over me in all of those situations, which is also very encouraging and very needed as well. So.
So when you first started to serve at the ranch, what did you expect it would be like, and then what were some unexpected surprises that came your way?
Um, I was talking to Shelby, a friend of mine, about this today. That working in ministry is very difficult. You wouldn't expect it because you're serving God. You know, you're surrounded by Christians. It should be loving and encouraging. But it's not always loving and it's not always encouraging. There are some times where you get frustrated with other people or people get frustrated with you, and you feel like things could have been done differently. But yeah, you just kind of have to just realize that even though you're surrounded by Christians, doesn't mean that everything's going to run perfectly or run smoothly, because we're all humans. We all make mistakes, and but we're all learning from all of that. So, yeah.
Sweet. All right. Now on to results of that ministry. What relationships did you build with the students?
The students, particularly in my classroom, I love all my students. It was very tiring at times and very discouraging, but I loved being able to teach them. I loved being able to be in their lives. And I kind of almost developed kind of like I feel like a big sister type of relationship with them. And I wouldn't say I'm motherly because I'm not very motherly towards them. I'm kind of like a big sister, I would say. And just especially with like some of the older girls as well, it was just fun. I went over the dorm sometimes and with the girls and watched movies. We played with the kids on the playground, and it was just cool to have just a fun relationship with them, as well as being in the classroom and kind of be that kind of like authority figure, but also be just to have fun with them as well and just show them that it's not all just school and homework and all that. So, yeah.
So you were able to like transcend that student teacher relationship and move on to something like a little more intimate with them?
Yeah, it was very difficult at first, especially with some of the older girls. They didn't take that very kindly, which, I mean, again, all teenagers kind of want to rebel against authority almost. So trying to maintain that teacher yet friend relationship was difficult, but I say that it got better over the time that I was there.
So like, did you disciple them? Were you able to teach them a little more than what you had to teach in chapel or in the classroom?
Yeah, I would say what a lot of the staff members encouraged and said is that the kids are not getting a lot of a good Christian example from their parents or their siblings, because they can't communicate with them, and a lot of their parents were not Christian as well, because Mexico is a very Catholic country. So just being able to be a good Christian example that they could like look up to a little bit, and also be there for them when they have questions. I had for meal times, we each have a different table and we each charge for a certain number of students. And I had a 17, 18-year-old girl named Miriam at my table. And she was very curious about the Bible, about different stories, about what different things meant. So I was able to talk to her a lot about different stories and different Psalms, especially. She liked reading the Psalms and the Bible, and just what they meant to us specifically. So, yeah.
So what progress did you see in them from like when you first interacted with them to upon your leaving the ranch? Or
I, in my students, I taught the first year I was there teaching, I taught level 1 at chapel, and one of my the students in my chapel class, his name was Orlando, and this is like one of my favorite stories. It's so cool. We were going through Jesus's miracles. We were talking about different miracles that Jesus did, and it was leading into Easter, so I was going to talk about Jesus being sacrificed and then rising up again. And Orlando was finally getting a language. He was finally understanding it, and he finally understood that different people had different sign names, and everything had a different sign name, and he was just so interested, and his eyes were always this big because he was just learning so much. And we were talking about Jesus, and Jesus walking on water. And I was acting it out, and I'm like, can he step over the boat? And Orlando's like, what? Like, he's going to fall into the water. And I asked him, like, can you guys walk on water? And they're like, no. Like, I would just, like, sink or I would swim. And I was like, yeah, but Jesus could walk on water. It was a miracle. And Orlando's like, what? He could walk on water? That is the coolest thing ever. Like, he was so excited, and his eyes were, he was like, oh my gosh. And I was like, yeah, that's super cool, isn't it? And I never really thought about that story through like a children's eye, and he was just so amazed and so like curious about it. And when we finally got to the Easter story, I was telling them how Jesus was betrayed, and then he died on the cross. And Orlando looked at me and he's like, seriously, like, you've been telling the story about this guy for weeks and he dies? And he's like, no, he can't die. He's like, no, why is this happening? And he was so confused and he was so upset. He just put his head down on his desk. And I was like, no, wait. Like, it has a happy ending. We're okay. And just seeing him like truly understand the story and be like emotionally invested into that was so cool. And yeah, that's just like one story that I really like to think about, because it just really shows that they're learning something about that, learning something about the Bible.
It's pretty sweet. What relationships did you build with the other people serving at the ranch? So the staff, I guess.
Well, I married one of them. I met my husband, Jason, down there, and we started dating my last year at the ranch. And then we got married in January. And the guy who married us was Johnny, the principal down there. So, and they're Johnny and Amber. They're one of our closest friends. They're an awesome couple. Yeah, so I'd say we developed pretty good relationships with people down there, and yeah, it's cool to go through the same experiences with people. You kind of connect over that. So.
So, even though you didn't have your family with you at all times, did having these other people that you connected with at the ranch strengthen your ministry?
I would say so, yes. There were times where I was just so frustrated, and then I would go over to Johnny and Amber's and I would just cry, and they'd be like, okay, like, this is what you should do, like, you need to, like, calm down a little bit, you're okay. They and Jason too just would encourage me when I felt like I couldn't do it anymore, if I was just doing a bad job, or if I wasn't doing what I could do. I was slacking off. They would say, hey, like, what's up? Like, do you need any help? What can you do to help you? So that was really awesome with all of them.
How did your family impact the deaf mute ministry at the ranch?
My mom did a lot for the school. She made a lot of copies. She made lots of little games, and she researched lots of different stuff, and she basically she found a math curriculum. She wrote out an entire year for level 3 of what to do and how to teach them. She found a science curriculum. Like, she did a lot for the school. And I think that will impact the ranch for years to come. And my dad was in charge of the groups, and he so every weekend a different group from the States would come down to the ranch and volunteer and work outside or volunteer in the classroom. So he was in charge of organizing all of them and making sure they had a job to do. And they were a very, their house was kind of like a go-to place for all the staff members. All the staff members were just really loved my mom and dad being there and just being an encouragement to them. They always just cooked meals for everybody and had movie nights and stuff, and it was a very good place for the staff to just go over there and kind of just relax a little bit.
So when they moved to Ensenada, what kind of impact were they able to make there?
My mom she was taking sign language classes in Ensenada just to learn more sign language. And then she also trying to think of every word. She decorated. She was the wedding coordinator for 2 weddings for a deaf couple in Ensenada. So I mean, that was super cool of her. Like 1 wedding's enough, but 2. And then my dad, kind of one of the reasons they moved away from the ranch was because my dad has a neurological disorder right now, so he's sick. So they kind of needed to get away from the ranch for a little while. And then, so my mom's just taking care of my dad in Ensenada, and then also just being an encouragement to the other missionaries in Ensenada, because like It was their house, just like the ranch, is a kind of like a safe place for everyone to go to. She would invite different people over, like almost every Saturday for dinner. She would be an encouragement to everyone. One family that moved to Mexico told my mom, like, "You're the reason why we stayed and we didn't go back home." Like, they're just really an encouragement to a lot of different people that they came in contact with. So, yeah.
How different was the ranch from when you first got there to when you left?
Not very different. It's very structured and very organized in that way. There were new students, different students, and a lot of the students had graduated as well. So, I mean, there's different people that you're interacting with and different staff members you're interacting with. So that was different. I taught a different level as well. So that was, again, difficult and new, but also very good. I enjoyed it a lot. So, yeah.
Did you find any progress or results within yourself between when you first got there and then when you left?
Yes, I think that I grew the most at the ranch than I ever have in my entire life. I did a gap year program before I moved down and became a staff member, and we basically in-depth studied the Bible straight for 9 months. We went on different mission trips, and we went to Israel, and we studied where Jesus walked, and I didn't really have time to process all of that information until I went down to Mexico, and I was very busy as well, but strangely less busy than I was when I was doing that gap year program. And I just had time to reflect and put into action all that I had learned at that program. So yeah, so that was kind of really cool that I would go through all my old journals and listen to speakers that came and talked to us. And I thought, oh yeah, like I learned that. I know that. I'm going to go implement that now because I have time to process all this information that's going on in my brain. So yeah.
It's cool. All right. I think next section is just anticipation of future trends for your Christian ministry. How do you want to serve in the future? And what are your plans for your ministry in the future, wherever you are?
My husband and I, Jason, want to move back to Mexico. We both just fell in love with the Mexican culture and the deaf culture, and eventually we want to start our own school for the deaf. We're not quite sure where or when, really, but we are planning on going back to Mexico and starting a school for the deaf down there. So, yeah.
Well, you answered all my other questions in that section. So I'm assuming your experience at the ranch influenced that heavily.
Mm-hmm.
So you said you wanted to build a new or start a new school for the deaf. Why not just rejoin the ranch and like become leadership there?
I really enjoyed working at the ranch. In my time at the ranch, I didn't exactly agree with everything that the leadership said or that the leadership showed in their lives. So I don't think I would go back to the ranch for that reason. Because yeah, just because of all of that. And we saw a lot of stuff at the ranch. We saw a lot of good stuff. We also saw some things that we didn't necessarily like. So I think that with all of that knowledge that we could make something that we like agree with and that we think would be better for the children that are attending and for the staff members that will be working there. So yeah, and there's also not a lot of stuff for the deaf in Mexico. The Mexican government doesn't really provide any funds for the deaf or anything like that. So Reza Ranch is great, and I love what they're doing, but they have that little area in Baja California Norte, but there's like so many other states, and Mexico is a very large country, so there's a lot of other deaf people around that are not getting the education or, more importantly, the gospel. So, yeah.
All right. And then the last section of this interview is just prayer requests or for those dedicated to praying for the specific area that you served in, which is Mexico. So what is in need of prayer at both the ranch and at your family's ministry at Ensenada?
Strong leaders. I feel that's a prayer request everywhere, really. Mm-hmm. Strong leaders who are willing to do what's right and willing to follow God in everything that they do. And more people as well. I feel like, sorry, there's a knock at the door.
Do you want to go get it?
No, I think that's just a package. Sorry. What's I saying? Oh, more people, because people are like, yeah, I'm going to move to Mexico and serve the people there. But I feel like going to Mexico specifically to serve the deaf is kind of something that people don't really think about. It's, I don't know, kind of almost an obscure thing. So awareness that that there are deaf people who definitely need the gospel, not only in Mexico but everywhere in the world. Yes, and male deaf pastors. They're in Ensenada. There is one full-time deaf pastor, one in all of Ensenada, and I don't even know about other places. I haven't really heard of any other male deaf pastors. So just that, it's a very great need, because they are learning the gospel from either the ranch or some other places, but they're not like having someone like feed into them continuously. So yeah.
So male deaf pastors, are you speaking about people males who just know sign language, or or deaf, like they have to specifically be deaf in order to relate with their congregation?
I think specifically Ensenada, someone who is deaf would more relate to the people they're speaking to, but that's only from Ensenada. And from what I know about the culture over there, I know that deaf cultures are different all around Mexico. So I mean, even just people who know sign language, who are just willing to teach and have the gift of teaching, would be something that's greatly needed all over Mexico.
Awesome. Okay, well, I think that is the end of the interview. We'll be keeping those prayer requests in mind,
okay.
Definitely. But thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview and just pouring out so much insight of this unique ministry that people, like you said, don't really think about.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Bye.